The Speed of Sound, this is, I think, your first full album. I think you had like an EP a couple of years ago, 2020, I believe. How was it to get in the studio and grind out that first kind of full-length thing?
It was, I recorded kind of, I guess, almost half of it up at Bear Creek in Washington with Ryan Hadlock at Bear Creek Studios. And that was kind of like going on a retreat.
Cool.
And he told me that sometimes, like, there's some musicians who will say, man, this is like rehab. and I've never been to rehab, but I can see that. And I can sort of see how, even just from an emotional perspective, it was sort of rehabilitative, and it was wonderful. And then I had kind of a finite amount of time there. And so I came back to LA and I started recording the rest of the album at Plier Studios here in where are they? In Anaheim. Oh gosh. No. Plier Studios, Santa Clarita. Sorry about that. So I started recording the second half of the album at Plier Studios in Santa Clarita with Jim Scott and Dan Navarro. And that was like coming home. Mm-hmm. It was like being around family. And I don't know. Gosh, what was the feeling? I guess, that's it. It just felt so instantly familiar and so supportive. And it really felt like I could take my time. It didn't feel rushed or pressured at all. And it was nice to work with people who were chasing the same thing I was chasing, which is an authenticity, and not necessarily, this sort of sterile note for note perfection, but the delivery of a message, something that was full of real feeling.
That's great. Well, you mentioned some names there. Your production team was nothing to shake a stick at. Dan Navarro, Jim Scott, Ryan Haddock. That right there is a wall of Grammys, and some notable songs and performances. How does a relative newcomer score that kind of team to work with on your first real full length album?
Well, Ryan Hadlock, that came from my manager. And I'd actually started recording some songs before that. And she said, wait. I don't think this is right. And I really fought her on it. I'm not going to name the producer I was working with, because he's so talented and wonderful. It has nothing to do with him. It just kind of was still sort of figuring out how these songs needed to sound and what they needed to be. And she goes, just give me a second. I want to put some more work into this and research it. And the next thing she knows, she goes, Ryan Hadlock is in. He produced the Lumineers. Brandy Carlisle recorded out there. Who else? Zach Bryan. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, yeah, that sounds about right. Let's go out there. And so that's how that happened. And then also Jill introduced me to Dan Navarro. She said, you really need to meet this guy. I think he's going to be the guy that can take you under his wing and give you some really great advice on how to go about all of this as an independent artist. And so it was really only supposed to be like a series of phone calls because Dan's always busy. I mean, I didn't even know if I was ever going to meet him in person. He's on the road most of the year. But the next thing I know, I'm going to meet him. He had a birthday concert out here at McCabe's. I'm wearing a McCabe's t-shirt right now. And night one was sold out. I got into night two. And, but right before I was about to go to that show, my manager goes, by the way, he co-wrote that song, We Belong for Pat Benatar. And I went, what? I mean, I just about fell over. That was my first favorite song in my life on this planet. That I used to tell people when I was like 3 years old, they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up, Jesse? And I'd say, Pat Benatar. And it was because of that song. So that was just a wild coincidence. And I was like, this is something. There's no there's no way this isn't something. And so I went to go see him, and we met that night. And then the next thing I know, he's producing my album. It was just, it was like, maybe we should do a song together. Well, maybe you could play on the album. Well, maybe you should produce the album. And so I was actually his production debut.
Wow.
He has not produced. Yeah. And, he wanted to work with his friend, Jim Scott. And, that was just a no-brainer. Like, of course I want to work with Jim Scott. And they ended up being like father figures to me. And at the time I was, sort of losing a father figure. He didn't die or anything like that, but my mom was going through a divorce from my stepfather.
Oh.
And, kind of a messy one, and, these guys, it just was nothing was by accident. You know what I mean? It was one of those situations where everything just was very much on purpose. And then my biological father came in and sang a song that, To the Light is actually his song that he wrote. So we're duetting on that last, track of the album, number 11. And it was magical. I'll never forget the recording of this.